Good morning and welcome to the Yuba Water Agency Board of Directors meeting for February 7th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Director Vasquez.
Here.
Director Blazier.
Here.
Director Fuhr.
Yes.
Director Bradford.
Yes.
Director Messick.
Here.
Director Bishop. Director Matthews. Okay.
Got him. Okay, great. We'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Messick, will you lead, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up is public comment. Andy?
Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the Board of Directors on any subject matter that is not on the meeting agenda and is within the board's subject matter jurisdiction. Public comment periods are limited to 3 minutes per person, and the total amount of time for the public comment is 15 minutes. Persons participating by way of video conference or teleconference shall ensure their audio is muted at all times, except when the board chair announces public comment periods. At those designated times, the members of the public wishing to speak shall enable their audio and state their name for the record. When multiple members of the public wish to speak, the clerk will determine the order of speakers and announce their names accordingly. To ensure proper conduct, the board reserves the right to mute the audio and video of any members of the public, violating generally accepted principles and decorum of official public meetings.
Great, thank you. Is there any comment from the public on anything not on the agenda? Okay, I don't see anything in the room or anyone on Zoom. So with that, we will move on to the consent agenda. So there is one item.
Move to approve.
Okay, I have a first from Director Vasquez.
I'll second it.
Okay, and a second from Director Messick. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Roll call vote, please.
Director Fuhr.
Yes.
Director Bishop.
Yes.
Director Vasquez.
Yes.
Director Matthews.
My goodness. Charlie, raise your hand.
Director Matthews, can you hear us?
Yes,
We got it. Thank you. Director Bradford.
Yes.
Director Blazier.
Yes.
Director Messick.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Next, we are going to move on to discussion items, starting with item 2. Consider granting the RD 817 $3 million increase in line of credit that RD 817 has in place with Yuba Water Agency for the Bear River Setback Levy project to create the cash flow needed to pay the contract needs while waiting on reimbursement from the state. Kyle, are you doing this one?
So this is the state-funded project, and during the closeout of a project, the timelines always get greatly extended. So this will help 817 to cash flow that during the closeout period, and then we'll be able to get fully reimbursed once the state starts sending the money back to 817.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
Do we have any idea what the typical turnaround is with the state?
On a closeout, I've seen, and I've seen longer than that. At Trillia, it could be up to 5 or 6 months on a closeout, documentation wise. I think Bear's a little simpler.
Hi, Tom Engler, MBK Engineers, the district engineer for Reclamation District 817. The cash flow we put together shows the project fully closed out by around August or September, with funding coming back from the state by then. The majority of it should come over the next 2 to 3 months. So this is hopefully just a short term. All of our construction invoices came due last month and this month. So we need to pay those, $2.5, $3 million bills and then come back later and get the money from the state.
Thanks.
Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please. Do you have? No, okay, sorry. Just making sure. Roll call vote, please, Manny.
Director Matthews. Director Vasquez,
Yes.
Director Bishop,
Yes.
Director Bradford,
Yes.
Director Fuhr,
Yes.
Director Blazer,
Yes.
Director Messick,
Yes.
Okay, next we are going to move on to item 3. Consider approval of a line of credit for up to $645,358 to the Camptonville Community Services District in support of their ongoing well development project. And I do know it is listed as a cash flow loan on the agenda, so I know there is a request to change that.
Yeah,
So
that's correct, Mr. Chair, Jim Attrition. I wanted to first outline, Richard Descartes from the Camptonville CSD is on Zoom today, so he will fill in some of the blanks and any questions that you might have. I just wanted to point out that we, upon further consideration with finance staff, we decided that a better approach and more efficient method would be to change this to a line of credit rather than a cash flow loan. It's just a better model overall for everyone. And the CCSD is in agreement with that approach. So if you want to get to the point where you're ready to make a recommendation in favor of this, I would appreciate a motion to that regard. So we get that in the minutes correctly. Fair enough. And otherwise, Andy, if Richard is online, have him.
does the board have any questions or comments regarding this item?
Jim, the difference is just that with a line of credit, they'll just draw money as needed as opposed.
Correct.
And so
Correct.
the interest will be lower in the
Right.
end.
It wouldn't be any. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay,
Richard, are you unmuted?
I am unmuted.
any additional comments? Richard?
Where was the last, did they have an annual audit on the district? Have they had that yet?
We are audited annually and have been so for the last, I don't know, at least decade.
Okay. Is there any chance that you could send a copy?
Sure, be more than
Thank
glad.
you.
Shall I send that to Jim?
Sure.
Will do.
Jim will disperse it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Well, he wanted us to change it, the wording, right?
Oh, yes.
Jim?
Oh, yeah.
Would you,
So moved with the change indicated to be a line of credit versus a loan.
thank you.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a first and a second. I think I already asked for public comment, but just in case, any public comment? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Director Vasquez,
Yes.
Director Matthews,
Yes.
Director Bishop,
Yes.
Director Bradford,
Yes.
Director Fuhr,
Yes.
Director Blazer,
Yes.
Director Messick.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll move on to item 4. Consider approval of a grant for up to $8,000 to the Yuba County Sheriff's Posse for replacement of a non-functioning well used to provide water at their designated emergency animal shelter.
Thank you. Good morning. So the Yuba County Mounted Sheriff's Posse is seeking $7,432 to support, improve the well on the property located at 5936 Marysville Road in Browns Valley. But I invited today Terry Ayers and Howard Mason, who absolutely know everything about this property, and I'd like them to explain a little bit to you what's going on with the well and the property, if that's okay. All right. Come on up here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, thank you for having us this morning. We really appreciate it. I'm going to let Howard start off because he's the one that really knows what's going on with the well.
Our property is.
Go ahead.
Okay. Our property is owned entirely by the Mounted Sheriff's Posse, and we consist of 57 volunteer members. We are also designated as the large animal evacuation center for the county, which includes horses, cattle, sheep, goats, etc. Our well is approximately 45 years old. It's antiquated. It does function, but just barely. I estimate we get between 3 and 4 gallons per minute out of it, and the longer it runs, the worse it gets. So what we're asking for is funding for this well to completely rebuild it. We do have an estimate for those repairs and upgrades. And that's pretty much it.
We, this last year alone, we housed probably in the interim, about 80 horses. Probably about 4 or 5 cattle, some pigs, some goats, sheep. So we're a growing entity, and unfortunately the fires are a big issue up in the foothills, and getting those animals in and then providing water for an extended period of time, it's taken a toll on our well system.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board?
Seems like they're saving a lot of money there somewhere. 'Cause that's a pretty good price for a well.
Yeah, that's complete rebuild.
Wow.
All right, thank you
Okay,
very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. Any additional board comment or questions? Okay.
So moved.
Second. I have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Director Bishop,
Yes.
Director Bradford,
Yes.
Director Vasquez,
Yes.
Director Pure,
Yes.
Director Messick,
Yes.
Director Blazer,
Yes.
Director Matthews.
Put your hand up, Charlie. I think we missed you.
Director Matthews.
Yeah.
Am I on?
Yes, I can hear you.
Raise your hand. Sure. Raise your hand.
I think we missed your vote, Charlie. Can you give us a thumbs up if it's a yes or a thumbs down if it's a no?
Guess 6 out of 7 isn't bad.
So we will move on to item 5. Consider adopting resolution 2023-01, authorizing the agency to apply for grant funding from the State Forest Health Grant Program. The local cost share for the project management and CEQA compliance over the 3-year term of the grant is estimated at $300,000 to leverage up to $7 million in grant funding. Morning, Joanna.
Good morning. My name is Joanna Lassard. I'm a project manager in the Resource Planning Division. One of my roles at the agency is leading the Watershed Resilience Program, which has a goal of developing large collaborative projects to increase the pace and scale of forest health and fire risk reduction projects in Yuba County, as well as our upper watershed. So we currently have a grant through CAL FIRE's Forest Health Program. It was funded in 2019, and that project is approximately 50% completed. So we're now eligible for the 2023 funding round. So we've worked with state, local, private, and also federal partners to develop a new forest health project. We're calling it the new Bullard's Bar Healthy Forest Project. That's Charlie. It will include 4,200 acres of treatment around Bullard's Bar. It will include approximately 600 acres in Yuba County, our Yuba Water Agency property, as well as approximately 1,000 acres in Tahoe National Forest. An interesting component of this project is that if we're awarded this grant, the federal component will count as cost share for actually a significant increased federal funding in our upper watershed. So we're really hoping that we get this funded, and actually CAL FIRE has encouraged us to apply. So actually, oh, there's no mouse. I want to show a map. Okay. So these are the black crosshatch is the area that will be treated. They're primarily fuels reduction treatments, almost exclusively mastication with some follow-up herbicide spray. So that's the planning. It's a very simplified grant from our last one. We've learned a lot. We're going to leverage the maximum award of $7 million, and we're requesting approximately $300,000 in cost share. That cost share would be used for CEQA documentation. We would be the lead CEQA as the applicant, and also project management. And I'm happy to answer other questions.
Sounds like a great opportunity. Any questions from the board? Comments?
I have a question sort of related. A year or two ago, the feds and the state were supposedly committed to doing 1 million acres a year. Has anything happened?
Not a million a year. We're working really hard. I would say that our upper watershed project, the North Yuba River Landscape Project, is probably moving as fast as anywhere in the state. And we continue to grow that project. We're working really hard to do NEPA on all of the acres up there that don't have NEPA. It's a 275,000 acre project area. So it's one of the largest NEPA projects that Tahoe's ever taken on. And that's moving along really well. And so once that's completed, we'll be able to develop a lot of new projects in our primary source watershed. The primary barriers to increasing pace and scale is actually not money right now. It's actually workforce, having enough people to do the work. So we're working really hard on that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So move. Second.
I have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Director Bradford,
Yes.
Director Fear,
Yes.
Director Blazer,
Yes.
Director Matthews.
Yes.
Thank you. Director Vasquez,
Yes.
Director Messick,
Yes.
Director Bishop.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going to move on to item 8, consider approval of amended and restarted general management employment agreement. Morning, Teresa.
Good morning, Teresa De La Santa, HR Manager. So the item before you, as you said, is the amended and restated General Manager Employment Agreement. And consistent with state law, we have to verbally recite a summary of the changes in salary and benefits. So for ease of record, that is as follows. With this amendment and based on board requested salary survey, a salary increase of 20% is included in the agreement, bringing the annual general manager salary to $358,217.60, which is $172.22 per hour. The general manager will also receive any future annual general wage adjustments approved by the board for non-represented employees. There have been no other changes to salary and benefits. With that, we'll take any questions.
Any questions from the board or comments?
No.
Okay, any public comment on this item? Seeing none, a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Director Matthews,
Yeah.
Director Vasquez,
Yes.
Director Bishop,
Yes.
Director Bradford,
Yes.
Director Fear,
No.
Director Blazer,
Yes.
Director Messick.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, we will move back to item 6, which is update on the agency's flood risk reduction division. Good morning, Ryan. Sorry to jump around on you there.
Aren't you gonna do 7 before 6? No, I thought you were gonna do 7 then 6.
I don't think so.
But that's not the jumps.
They would just want to.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Ryan McNally, your Director of Water Resources and Flood Risk Reduction. This morning, we're going to talk a little bit about our flood risk reduction mission here at Yuba Water, kind of what our division looks like, what we do, some challenges we're looking at, some of the things we've done, challenges we're looking at moving forward. So again, this morning, it's going to be myself, and I'm going to recruit the help of my colleague, John James, who's the Director of Resource Planning. And then I also want to introduce Kyle Morgado, who is the Flood Risk Project Manager. He does a lot of the legwork on many of the things we're going to talk about this morning, especially Trillia, the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority. Kyle's been instrumental in some of the transition that we've had there. So our agenda is we're going to talk about Yuba County flood history, flood risk reduction goals and partners, major projects completed and underway, current planning efforts, and then we'll obviously wrap it up and field questions. So we'll start kind of where, with the strategic plan. And you might recall that we've recently updated the strategic plan. Everything we'll talk about this morning fits into strategic priority number 1, which is at the core of it, the agency's formation in 1959. And the primary reason the dam was built to create New Bullards Bar. Strategic priority number 1 consists of 4 objectives. Objective 1, support the reclamation district's effort to improve Yuba County levees to achieve or exceed the state's urban level of flood protection requirements. So simply put, we work with our levee and reclamation districts to assist them in a number of ways to protect the people of Yuba County from floodwater. Just a more simple way to say that. Objective 2, reduce flood risk reduction in rural agricultural areas through a combination of structural and non-structural actions. These are really accomplished through programs, planning, implementation grants, et cetera. We come forward to the board every so often with grants for our reclamation districts. That's really where that's captured as an objective 2. Objective 3, develop and implement a plan to maintain and improve the flood risk reduction capability of New Bullards Bar Reservoir. This is really exploring how we can improve flood storage and managing flows from New Bullards Bar. And objective 4 is work with our local emergency service organizations to better prepare for emergency response and evacuations. To take this a step further, sometimes all the projects in the world might not be enough, and protecting people comes down to getting them to safety quickly. So evacuations are huge and some of the things we're looking at. And working with our emergency managers to prepare the people of Yuba County is every bit as important as any of the capital improvement projects that you see before you. So, and really before we dive into the heart of the presentation, I want to try to explain a term you'll hear throughout today's presentation, and that's level of protection. So federal and state agencies use this number to determine how safe an area is, what kinds of structures can be built there, the cost of insurance premiums, et cetera. You always hear 100, 200, or even 500-year levels of flood protection. And really, this number represents the percentage of likelihood that flooding will occur in any given year, consistent with the probability of its value. For example, a 100-year level flood event is so large and so rare that we could reasonably expect it to occur once per every 100 years, or a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. And the same holds true with 200 and 500-year events. This is a percentage of probability. When I say that, though, I just want to eliminate any confusion that, these things, even though it's a probability like one every 100 years, they can happen 2, 3, 4, 5 years in a row. There's no, just because we've had one, obviously, I think everybody here has lived through a couple of 100-year events. They do happen. They can happen more frequently. And then before I move on, I think it's important to follow up by telling you that our incredible communications team is hard at work to develop new ways of communicating that risk that will hopefully allow people to better identify with. This is really the only thing we have at this point, is this metric, but we're working on developing something that is easier to explain to the public on what flood risk, how do we quantify flood risk? So Yuba County flood history. So Yuba County's flood history has been documented since record keeping began in the late 1800s. However, the catalyst for the Yuba County Water Agency and the Yuba River Development Project, which was responsible for constructing the New Bullards Bar Dam just above Dobbins in the North Fork of the Yuba River, was the result of flooding that began on Christmas Eve in 1955. But with this slide, I'll back up a little bit and talk about what causes the flooding, or what causes the propensity for flooding on the Yuba River. So I think we all know we're surrounded by 3 major rivers: the Yuba, Feather, and Bear River. Well, especially true on the Yuba is the hydraulic mining buildup that occurred, in the late 1800s, and what that caused was, the Yuba River at one point was a deep water channel, and the steamships would come up to Marysville, and there was not a lot of problems with flooding. But as hydraulic mining occurred, the siltation raised the riverbeds to the point today where the Yuba River is actually higher than the elevation of the city of Marysville. So the river is actually higher in the city. So that caused early settlers to build earthen levees. Those levees weren't engineered to the standards they are today, so they weren't nearly as good. And so that's why we've seen a lot of risk in Yuba County from flooding, and we continue to see that today. So there's been a lot of floods over the years, but the one that we really focus on is the 1955 flood, because again, as I started to talk about, that was the catalyst for creating the Yuba County Water Agency in 1959. So yeah, obviously, Yuba County kind of dodged a bullet in 1955. The flooding occurred, but really it was catastrophic for Sutter County and the city of Yuba City. But it motivated the voters of Yuba County to get off top dead center and actually move forward with the construction of the facility. So 1955 is really where it all started for us at the Yuba County Water Agency. Another important flood event was the February of 1986, when water on the levees was starting to recede. Actually, after a week of historic flows, the section behind what is today known as where Walmart is today collapsed and killed 2 and inundated 4,000 homes. So we're just now seeing, I mean, even right now, we're still seeing the economic fallout of that. And all these years later, we're starting to see some rebound at the Peachtree Mall. So in that picture there on the slide, you'll see on the left-hand side of the slide, that's the Peachtree Mall almost completely underwater in 1986. So obviously with Costco coming in, that's a testament to really how long it's taken for the area to recover. In early 1990, as a result of the 1986 flood, Yuba Water requested Congress and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to initiate the Yuba River Basin Project to bring a 200-year level flood protection to Yuba County. The inset also shows the Peachtree Mall there, popped up. So the big one I think that everybody really remembers is 1997. So when I talk about this, I always ask about, everybody to remember when El Nino, La Nina, and the Pineapple Express became household names. Those were all things that we attribute today as we know them as atmospheric rivers. But in 1997, those were the buzzwords. So just after the new year, an atmospheric river storm melted a near record snowpack, creating devastating runoff. All that water cascading down the western slope of the Yuba and Feather River watershed quickly overwhelmed the system and caused multiple levee failures in the Central Valley. Near present-day Plumas Lake, a section of levee on the Feather River failed, claiming 3 lives and nearly 1,000 homes, further emboldening the Yuba River Basin Project, which then received congressional authorization and paved the way for many of the projects we see today. And this was the second time in my life that my family, evacuated to the foothills to escape floodwaters. And pardon me, it's impacted me so deeply that even today, the term "next time we evacuate" is factored into our household planning 26 years later. So it's something I still think about, and I'll talk a little bit later in the slideshow about how it affected me, and it's something I think about all the time. The top inset there shows the break there in near Arboga or out in Plumas Lake. So we're going to talk a little bit about our flood risk reduction goals and key projects. So we have 5 overarching goals here in our flood risk reduction division. First, 200-year level protection for urban areas and a 100-year level of protection for agricultural areas. Next, identify the status of current and ongoing flood risk reduction projects. Identify opportunities to coordinate and unify smaller improvement projects for increased efficiencies. Develop a long-term plan that identifies needs and opportunities to further reduce flood risk. And to develop a long-term plan to complete construction and repairs necessary to achieve reduced flood risk. Really, simply put, our mission is to protect the people of Yuba County from flood water. That's what it all distills down to. So, of the Yuba River Basin projects, $500 million in improvements, which is closer to 600 today, $600 million if we start adding everything up. The state has funded nearly $350 million, while locals have funded the remaining $150 million. Yuba Water continues to pay approximately $5.5 million annually in bond debt to cover both the agency and Yuba County's local cost shares for much of the completed levee work, including the Feather River and Bear River setback levees, and will continue to do so through 2038. Yuba Water also contributed a $2.5 million line of credit for the Marysville Ring levee repairs and more than $2 million to the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority for the work at the Goldfields. We'll talk about even additional projects here in a little bit. But this slide really only illustrates our local partners and includes RD 784, RD 10, RD 817, RD 2103, the Marysville Levee Commission, Department of Water Resources, Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So these are the people we work with almost on a daily basis. We're always in contact, and we've really fostered a close relationship with all of these partners. What this slide doesn't identify are the many other agencies and organizations we work with as we become recognized as leaders in flood risk reduction here in California. Yuba Water is really, I'm biased, but we're really at the tip of the spear on what we're doing for flood risk reduction. A lot of people look to Yuba County and we kind of set the bar pretty high. So it's a point of pride. So much so, in fact, that our neighbors at Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, SABUFCA, have added Yuba Water's ARC spillway to their strategic plan since it'll provide a flood protection benefit to many of their constituents across the river. So we have partners that aren't even in Yuba County that are seeing the benefits of things that we're doing and are in absolute support of everything that we have going on. So when it comes to levies, we'll talk a little bit about levies and reclamation districts, but many people might not realize that Yuba Water doesn't actually own or operate any in reality. And although the agency constructed, owns and operates the New Bullards Bar Dam, which is critical to flood risk reduction, levees protecting our county are owned and operated by various local jurisdictions and reclamation districts. It's our responsibility to partner with those levee and reclamation districts. We can do that in a number of ways, including financial support for many of their capital improvement projects, because the work they do really is the front line in flood protection. But we also recognize ourselves as a vital resource in the mission, and we do more when the partners reach out than just finance projects. And a recent example of this occurred during the series of storms sustained in January. When RD 784 was short on manpower for levee patrols, one of our dish tenders stood up and answered the call to help patrol the levees on the Bear River. And it fills me with tremendous pride to see this kind of cooperation, because we truly are unified in protecting the people of Yuba County. And in my career, this is really, it's the most cooperation I've ever seen, and it's only getting better. You know, everybody's rowing in the same direction. All the RDs, the levee districts, the county, the water agency, it's all about protecting the people of Yuba County, and everybody's working together to that end. I'll talk a little bit about Trillia, Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority, because we can't talk about flood risk reduction in Yuba County without talking about Trillia. You know, they successfully leveraged over $500 million in state and federal funds to construct the levees that led to the 200-year design certification for the communities of Linda, Olivers, Arboga, and Plumas Lake. So when we talk about levees in Yuba County, you know, our shining stars, you know, the Feather River setback levee, the Bear River setback levees, the Goldfields levees, I mean, brand new levees that are that I argue are the best in the nation. And that was all through Trillia's hard work.
Is it okay to interrupt you for a moment?
Please.
Can you go back 2 slides? I was just curious on the infographic. On the 784, is there a sliver that isn't controlled by 784 between the two 784s, or no, it's just how you guys drew up the graphic?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So yeah, that just illustrates where the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal is. 784, it's a contiguous area.
And then 817, same thing. There's just that's the waterway.
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks.
Of course. So, but it's really important, and Kyle, please feel free to step up and talk a little bit about Trillia if I'm missing something here. But this last year, with the retirement of Paul Bruner, the executive director of Trillia, Yuba Water, we kind of identified an opportunity to make Trillia a lot more efficient, and we've stepped in and worked with the county of Yuba. So what happens with Trillia is it was a joint powers agency between RD 784 and Yuba County. The default executive director is the county administrator. So with Mr. Bruner's retirement in early 2022, the responsibility of Trillia kind of defaulted back to the county administrator's office. Yuba Water stepped in by helping out, you know, with the day-to-day stuff, especially on the closeout of the massive projects that were, you know, undertook that were completed in South Yuba County. And Kyle's been instrumental in that. That's why I'm picking on Kyle a little bit to, yeah, if you want to talk a little bit about that transition just for a minute or two.
So when I started in January 2022, taking over Paul, we're finishing up the 1E grant funding projects, which were started, I think in 2007 or something like that. They've been going on for a long time. So there's just little trickling things on some projects that we're closing out, the Bear River setback, the Feather River setback, the Upper Yuba, the Goldfields, and all these projects, the Western Pacific Interceptor Canal levee is what we call the backside by that little split that Seth pointed out. Going through the real estate, going through all the deed transfers, Trillia owns land. We have to get that off of our books, and just consolidating and checking all the last boxes that were prepared for the audit when we close out. We've given the closeout package for Upper Yuba levee improvement project. That closeout is in 2 DWR. We did a partial closeout for the Goldfields project because we extended. That was back. We came for the board for the local cost share extension on the UFR grant. That's the Urban Flood Risk Reduction Grant. To continue some work with the climate resiliency and the multi-benefit feasibility study out there in the Goldfields are kind of south training wall project. So we gave a partial closeout to that. So we're working through all of that at Trillia to close that down. But we also, as you guys know, went out for a climate resiliency brick grant, and we're also went for a Liza Bin. We have a habitat grant that's 100% funded with no local cost share that we're also going after as part of Trillia. So we're consolidating. I work with Kevin almost daily, and we also work with the auditor's office over here, and just becoming a team in 784 too, Patrick. So it's a good transition. We're getting everything closed down, but also looking to see what future projects and flood risk reduction that we can manage through Trillia. So any questions on Trillia?
Kyle's our Trillia guy. I mean, he's just everything Trillia. So I wanted to have him come up and just talk about that for a little bit. So major work completed underway, and I'll go through this just for the sake of time. I'll try to hurry through this. A lot of this is just a summary of the things we're working on. 2 ongoing flood risk reduction projects, 13 flood risk reduction projects that are complete or in construction, 3 studies underway, and 6 projects that are in the planning or design phase. We have a lot going on in flood risk reduction in Yuba County. Again, Feather River and Bear River setback levees. Bear River setback levee is a 2-mile long levee protecting South Yuba County, a 200-year level of protection. The Feather River setback levee is a 5.7-mile long levee protecting South Yuba County. Again, another 200-year level of flood protection. The big thing about these 2 levees is they lower flood stage upstream by 1 foot on the Bear River and 3 feet on the Feather River, which is huge in terms of levees. I mean, it just takes a lot of pressure off the levees during high water events. And then there's a multi-benefit element of these projects that expanded habitat, ecological preserves, and floodways. So there's a lot of conservation area associated with these projects. Another important project we're working on, and it's not us, but we're supporting the city of Marysville, and that's the Marysville Ring Levee. So 7.5-mile levee surrounding the city of Marysville. We're working to ensure that it exceeds the requirements for 200-year level protection by 2025, and it is on target. I mean, we've had some hiccups along the way, but by our team working closely with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we seem to have resolved some of the issues, and things are moving forward as expected. So another huge project for Yuba County and the city of Marysville is getting this ring levee complete. You can see in this graphic, this is the repair schedule. The next, the final phase of construction here is the blue line here on the, I guess it would be the bottom of the city there. That's what they're going to start embarking on next, the next construction season. Tom, that's correct. The NSED also shows a picture of the city of Marysville in 1955, again, to show the vulnerability of, how vulnerable Marysville is during times of high water. The Yuba Goldfields levee. This was the final levee project for Trillia. This kind of rounded out their major projects in South Yuba County, and this was completed in 2022. This is the new levee out on Hamilton-Smartville Road. It's parallel to the road, almost all the way out to Beale Air Force Base. The Bear River setback levee was just completed, and I want to include it here because we got to test it in January, and with the widened channel, the much stronger levee, it performed flawlessly. So we got to put this project in use, and this was another project that Yuba Water Agency invested in to protect people in South Yuba County. Allwood Side Channel Project, another important project. It's a multi-benefit project. We're creating habitat in the Yuba River, while at the same time improving flood risk reduction to our communities, Hallwood, District 10, and to some extent even the city of Marysville. Just some pictures from the Hallwood Side Channel Project. The North Training Wall Project. This is the next project that Trillia is working on, and phase 1 is complete. This ties the community of Hallwood. There's a levee that will protect, a training wall that will protect the community of Hallwood that ties into just near Daguerre Dam. So phase 1 is complete, and then the Trillia has received the implementation funding from the DWR for phase 2, which is in the pre-construction phase right now. Climate Resiliency Project. This is the project we refer to internally as the 500-year project. This is about a $40 million project to integrate the urban levees in South Yuba County, and this is to increase the level of protection from 200 to 300-year level of protection. So that's if the levees were built standalone, they would become 300-year levees. However, when the Arc Spillway is constructed, it would become a 500-year level of protection for South Yuba County. Which, when I say 500-year level of protection, it's important to know that 500-year level of protection, really, there is no metric for it right now. We would be the first. We're pioneering here. So when we look at these numbers, it's again the tip of the spear in flood risk reduction. Goldfield's multi-benefit project. This is design work for what we're calling the South Training Wall to protect the goldfields from flooding, and we're working very closely with Tykert. You can see that embankment in the middle of the photo there. That's the 100-year levee, and it's critical for providing that 200-year level protection that the Goldfields levee provides. But one thing about that 100-year levee is it's right in the middle of Tykert's reclamation plan. So at some point in the future, it's inevitable. They're going to mine that area. So we're working closely with them to come up with a solution and develop a south training wall, permanent south training wall that will protect the goldfields from flooding from the Yuba River. And then a little bit about flood management programs and plans. We have the Bear River Corridor Management Plan, the Feather River Management Plan, and the Agricultural Floodplain Task Force. And there's all sorts of things that we're working on right now just to plan out into the future and how to best protect the people of Yuba County. And with that, we're going to talk a little bit about operations and some of the things we're working on. And I'm going to ask John James to come up and talk a little bit about some of the things he's working on right now.
Chairman Bradford and board, thank you. John James, Director of Resource Planning for the agency, and I oversee our flood operations programs and partnerships. Talk a little about that today. So first I wanted to talk about the FCO program, and this is kind of the foundational coordinated operations program that we work with our partners in the region. So following the analysis, the 1997 flood, this program was born, and really it's been a successful model, not only in the region, but for the rest of the state since 2005. And the reason it's successful is really the partnerships. So with our partners, the Army Corps, Sacramento District, Department of Water Resources, both the State Water Project and the Flood Operations Center and the California Nevada River Forecast Center. This program has improved coordination and communication with the decision support system and the coordinated releases between New Lords Bar and Lake Oroville. And really, it's been a program that's provided for increased relationships. So even in this past event in January, technically we didn't have to coordinate with those folks, but we had pre-coordination calls and just checked in. And that program also has annual exercises where we simulate flood events, so we're always prepared in case one actually occurs. So building on the success of the FCO program back in 2019, with some of our same partners, we started on the Yuba Feather FIRO program. And this program is a research and operations program, and it is a flexible water management approach, which uses improved weather forecasting to help water managers selectively retain or release water from reservoirs. Basically, it provides decision support for how much water to release ahead of storm events or how much water to retain when there are no storms forecast. And really for us, there's two elements to it really, which are improving forecasts specifically around atmospheric rivers. These are the storms that have caused all the major flooding in our region over the years. And two, use those improved forecasts to enhance our reservoir operations. The forecast improvement element is led by Dr. Marty Ralph and the Scripps Center for Western Weather and Water Extreme, CW3E. And Dr. Ralph has really made atmospheric rivers a household name in the past decade with his research. And we have personally developed a great working relationship with him and his team. The other group that's involved in this project is the Corps Engineering Research and Development Center, ERDIC. And they're looking at how to integrate these forecasts into flood operations, specifically in the water control manuals, which I'll talk about here in a second. In fact, their successful pilot projects on the West Coast, which we're one of three, are actually paving the way for them to investigate FIRO nationwide. So as I mentioned, we're looking with our FIRO program to integrate those operations, new operations, into the water control manuals. So we partnered with DWR and the Corps to update those manuals concurrently with our FIRO program. And this is a kind of a unique opportunity. Usually FIRO programs are used to justify updates to water control manuals, and we're actually working in parallel to do that at the same time. So along with improving forecasts and integrating through into the manuals, they're being updated to be more adaptable, meaning that as forecasts improve, that we won't have to go back and try and re-update the whole manuals, that the rules will actually be included in them already. And so with the FIRO program and the updates to the water control manuals at New Bullards Bar and Lake Oroville, we're also looking at how to integrate the new operations of the ARC spillway. So shown here, the ARC spillway, as it's being designed, would be 31 feet lower in the reservoir, provide for an additional 117,000 acre feet of management. And we're analyzing how FIRO rules will be used to make releases from the ARC spillway ahead of large atmospheric rivers to reduce downstream stages during the peaks of these events. And so all three of these items are related. Really, they're looked at as kind of the software and the hardware. And really the goals are improving forecasting, operational flexibility, and reducing flood risk and enhancing public safety. So in terms of what that looks like as far as a schedule, the ARC spillway design and environmental document should be completed by the end of this year. And the FIRO program is in the final viability stage, which means it's going to be providing information to the Corps to update their water control manuals. And in turn, FIRO in the next following years, 24 and 25, will be looked at how to actually implement those rules into our FCO system. And then the goal would be to have those system changes in place when the Corps updates the water control manuals. At this point, that's expected in 2026. So in addition to all these activities, we recently completed a comprehensive flood study. Working with our flood expert consultants for the last 18 months, we investigated what additional projects and programs are going to be necessary to reduce flood risk in the county in the coming years. And we'll be bringing a full presentation to the board in the coming weeks. And with that,
Out of curiosity, the presentation you guys are going to bring next month, when we talk about flood risk management, is it specific to catastrophic type situations of atmospheric rivers and snow melt and things that caused those previous large floods, or does it include smaller scale floods like what's experienced in Olivehurst?
It's more than catastrophic.
So if we could include smaller scale flooding, since that would be under flood risk management as well, that would be great.
Don, I have a question with respect to the water control manual update as well. So it sounds like when that process is complete, the ARC spillway wouldn't actually likely be done at the same time. So will the manual kind of have two scenarios, like with the ARC spillway and without the ARC spillway, or will we have to go back and update it again once the spillway is complete?
yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so actually in the analyses, both in the FIRO program and the Corps' water control manual update, we're looking at both with and without the ARC spillway. So that in the interim, if for instance, the water control manuals are updated, yet a spillway wasn't completed yet, that we'd be able to use the FIRO rules just without the capacity of the spillway.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Through the chair. How close did we come in these current storms to panic time? Looking at Elk Grove, looking at areas that didn't fare so well, do we still have a safety margin, big safety margin there?
Yeah, so we saw the events unfolding in late December. We took some operational mechanisms to increase flow outside of Coal Gate Powerhouse. And so we were thinking that we'd actually have to make releases through the spill gate with some of the bigger forecasts, but those forecasts actually came down during the event in early January. So by releasing that water ahead of time, we were able to manage it without having to go into the flood pool.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
So additional planning and some coordination that we have underway. This is really cool stuff. So we're exploring the opportunity to partner with the Center of Information Technology Resource in the interest of society. So we call that Citrus. And that's a partnership with the UC system. But we're looking at exploring technologies that, potentially putting fiber optics in the levees, traffic modeling to provide our emergency managers with the safest and most efficient plans to evacuate threatened areas, and even platforms that we can roll out to gamify scenarios. And one example they use is, hey, if you need to evacuate what happens if you take two cars as opposed to one? What's that do to the traffic model? And so potentially you have this system that you can roll out to the public where they can play with that. And then it gets them thinking about, what do we need to do when it comes time to evacuate? I'm really big on the traffic modeling because, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, just some personal history. Evacuating people is critical in not just flooding, but fires, anything that we have, any of the emergencies we have in Yuba County. And it's been said that, in some of these, catastrophic fires we've seen, the backup it could be attributed just to one stoplight, right? So if Public Works, that whoever that jurisdiction is, that Public Works department would have known, hey, let's disable the stoplight. It could potentially save lives. Something that minor could potentially save lives. These are the things we can look at with this technology of, hey, if there's a situation over here, what's the best way to move people out of, Marysville? What's the best way to move people out of South Yuba County? So those are some of the things we're going to be looking at through this partnership. And then one thing we have in the hopper right now that actually is, in the final stages is the real-time inundation mapping project. And this gives our emergency managers in the sheriff's office the ability to identify, if there's a weakness in one of the levees and there's a potential, if there's a fear that we're going to have a breach, what's that going to look like? What's the effect of inundation to that local area? And this is something that's never existed before, and it's a tremendous tool in terms of how to respond, to evacuations or to get help to the people that need them or that need help. We can see the inundation as it happens in real time. So that's expected to be complete at least by 2024, I think. OES is the lead on that project, and we're working very closely with them on it.
Question, would
Yeah.
that also include districts that are upriver of us, such as the Orville Dam? Would it include that sort of reach as well?
Absolutely. Yep. So I'm not gonna go through this list. I mean, you can just see, just for effect, this is an extensive list of everything that we've been working on and the stuff we have planned out in the future. This list is going to continue to grow as we identify projects through this, the plan John just mentioned. This is what we do at Yuba Water. I mean, this is flood risk reduction, and this is why we exist, is to protect the people of Yuba County. So I have a couple graphics that I like, so I've been reading from these slides and we're going over the information, but I like to make this real. And so this was created from a feature that the Appeal Democrat ran in January of 1997. So the picture on the left is October 9th, 1996. Picture on the right, January 3rd, 1997. And I remember this vividly, opening up the paper and seeing this, and for a couple of reasons. We were evacuated at the time, but it really shows first I want to draw your attention to two things. First, look at South Yuba County. Look at the inundation there. I mean, that's the levee. You can kind of see where the outline of the levee is. You can see how far the water went past the levee out into South Yuba County, Arboga, Plumas Lake. And that's really the catalyst that moved us into a lot of the projects you saw this morning and many more. So there's that. Second thing, look at the city of Marysville and how vulnerable it is. It's an island, right? I mean, so that's the thing that we produced this this graphic recently to present to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as we're talking about the Marysville Ring Levee and how important it is to not just the county, but especially the city of Marysville, right? Rideout is our region's only level 3 trauma center. There's so much critical infrastructure in Marysville that's vulnerable when the water gets high like this. And the other thing I'd ask you to do is identify, if you can in this picture, the evacuation routes from Marysville, right? So you can't really see them, but there's only 5. Simpson Lane is completely inundated at this point. So you have 5 ways in, 5 ways out. So those are the arrows. The red arrows show the ways out, right? What I was going to draw on this graphic, and I didn't do it because it would just ruin the whole picture. I was going to draw red squiggle lines of where the traffic locks up. You look out in Yuba City. Yuba City's evacuating too. So this whole thing would have been a red squiggle mess because of how bad traffic locks up. So it just underscores the importance of the work we're doing, like in evacuation planning, and also just flood risk reduction in general, protecting people from the high water. And just for fun, I added that little blue arrow. That's my house in 1997. So again, I want to make this real. In 1997, when the water got high, so I lived right up against the levee near Marysville High School. I went out that morning and I couldn't believe what I saw. I climbed up on the levee, and as far as I could see was water. And it was terrifying. It's not just see it, you could feel it. I mean, you could feel the power of the water. And the other thing that kind of chuckle when I read or look at this picture, it was obviously colorized for effect. It wasn't a placid blue water. This was muddy, murky, violent water with debris floating everywhere. There was foam, debris, car parts, garbage, everything, oil sheen. It was really, really quite something to behold. And I only say that because it's once you live through that, it kind of becomes who you are, and it's something you think about all the time. And it's something that you know, when I close this presentation, I just kind of want it to be real. This is something that will happen again, and it's something we're working hard to protect the people of Yuba County from. So with that, I also have this slide that one of our predecessors, W.T. Ellis Jr., history always repeats itself. Remember the winter of 1861, 1862. Always be prepared, always be alert, and always watch the tricky Yuba. So I see this every day on my way home. I drive down B Street, and there's a monument on the levee at the corner of First and B Street that has this carved into it. So I see it every day on my way home. This is something we think about all the time here at Yuba Water. So in summary, reducing flooders for the people of Yuba County is our core mission. Working together with our partners to advance 200-year level protection and 100 for the urban areas and 100-year level protection for the agricultural community. Many projects and programs have been completed in recent years, many more on the way. And the continued planning and coordination of funding for these projects is really our mission in delivering on our flood risk reduction mission. So with that, any questions? I know I went long, I apologize, but it's something that I'm pretty passionate about.
I have a couple.
Wait, real quick. Do you mind? Sorry, Ryan. I just want to kind of give the flavor of kind of what we were hoping to accomplish here, and we absolutely are going to have time for your question, Wayne. So first off, this presentation on flood risk reduction is kind of the first in a series of presentations we plan to give to the board in follow-up to the update to our strategic plan in late 2022. So there's many strategic areas that we operate in, and flood risk reduction is one of our highest priorities. So we thought we'd kick off the year with flood risk reduction being the first presentation. And what this really is look, we have a couple pages in a strategic plan of this is what your goals are, the board of Yuba Water Agency's goals are. And this presentation is how we plan to implement those goals. Okay, so that's what we're trying to present here today. And we want to have a dialogue about it. We want to get it out in front of the public. And so we're going to do this in a series of presentations. So water supply will come, and then hydro generation will come, and those types of things. Secondly, our intent here is to get the staff in front of the board. Primarily, the board has seen the staff the last several years since we've grown coming out from under PG&E in 2016. We have 2 new board members. They may not know which staff members are leading what effort. So that's the other intent here, is getting staff in front of you. And then lastly, I want to address the internal drainage question before we take questions. So Director Fuhrer asked about the plan that we plan to present on March 7th. And I want to be very clear that that plan does not address internal drainage, and it's not the scope of that plan. Ryan, if you mind putting the presentation back up and going back to the Appeal Democrat page. So our strategic plan prioritizes flood risk reduction in kind of the catastrophic flood risk reduction sense, in that our intent is to work on flood risk reduction projects that are intended to save lives or for public safety. And we're talking about events that we're trying to prevent events that look like this. So the 86 and 97 event, you heard we lost 4 people in Yuba County in 1986 and lost 2 people in 1997. And that's really what our flood risk reduction program is. We absolutely acknowledge that internal drainage is center squared in the Agency Act and allowed, but this board has prioritized public safety as our priority for flood risk reduction. And I want to be very clear that that's what this overall program does. That's what Ryan and John have presented today. That's what the updated plan will include on March 7th. We will continue to work with the County of Yuba, RD 784, and others to improve the local drainage issues, and we acknowledge that they exist. And we plan to do that, and we'll continue to do that. And there are many projects underway with the county, with Yuba Water Agency as a partner, but it's not dead center squared up in our flood risk reduction program as far as our internal drainage goes. So I just want to be clear on that. Wayne, go ahead and ask your question.
So it's probably partially Ryan and partially John. I noticed, I think these were your forecasts, John, that were coming out a month or so ago that in emails, and it would show, I hadn't seen anything like this before, but it would show that maybe there's a 5% chance we're going to get 6 inches of water above Bullard's Bar. And then there was a 5% chance we would only get an inch, and then the official forecast was there was a black line that would say 3 inches or whatever. And I don't know if you could explain that and how, because I would look at that and say, wow, okay, 2 or 3 inches is not a big deal. But if there's a 5% chance we're going to get 6 and nobody's really talking about that. So just explain what that means.
Yeah, sure. So there's essentially two methodologies in terms of providing forecasts. One is a single value forecast. So it basically gives you a value over time, and that's called a deterministic forecast. The other is what's called a probabilistic forecast. So essentially that takes into account what's the uncertainty. So there's a range of possibilities in these forecasts, not only in the meteorological side, but the hydraulic side. So they run through all these iterations, and essentially the probabilistic forecast is the full range of the uncertainty of what could happen based on that given forecast. And so that black line they're referring to was that single point value. That was kind of the best guess of the forecast. And it landed in between that full range or scope of uncertainty. And what they try and do is bracket that uncertainty. So certain ranges are more likely, between 40 and 60%, for example. But then on the extremes, like you were mentioning, well, maybe it could get up to 6 inches or whatever. There was still a 5% chance that could happen. And so that's kind of the two approaches. So when you're looking at a forecast, that range gives you the level of uncertainty. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I just looked at those and thought, I can see that we don't want to tell the people maybe that there's it would cause panic if everybody thought, yeah, we're going to get 6 inches and here's what that would cause. I don't know. I wondered how to interpret all that. And then the other comment I had, or
Wayne,
question.
real quick, sorry to interrupt you for the second time today. But I want to add on to John's answer there, and I'll give you like a real life scenario. So I sat here at our first board meeting of the year, the beginning of January, and gave a kind of an explanation of what we were seeing in the forecast. And John explained earlier that we thought we would have to spill New Bullards Bar, right? We thought the inflows were going to be such that, we'd have to spill, we'd be in the flood space. And then I think I said something like, look, if the forecast goes on the wet side, we could be looking at it like something close to a 97 event. And that's what caused us to determine that, Ryan, we need to get the flood entities together. We need to get the guys knowing that, look, it's not likely necessarily that something bad is going to happen, but we need to be prepared for it, because all it's going to take is a 24-hour change in the forecast and the inflows, and you go from something that's a no big deal ho hum to something that's like, oh my gosh, tomorrow we probably need to evacuate. So that's what John talks about as the probabilistic. What we don't want to do is we don't want to alarm the public and say, oh my gosh, this 5% is going to happen, but we want to be prepared for that. And so every time there's a high flow event, we kind of look at that and go, that could happen. We don't want to get caught flat-footed, so we need to be prepared for that. Even though it's only a 5% chance, we want to be prepared for that. We being the flood control entities in Yuba County.
So the other question or comment, I'm not sure which I'm making here, but I also really hate the 100 and 200 year and designations, because so many people misinterpret what that really means. And what I've wondered lately, I took a hydrology class decades ago, and I don't know how much the science has advanced since then, but when they talk about 100-year storm, are they also considering what happened the day or 2 days before that, and what's downstream, or what's in all the vernal pools that are going to drain? Do they consider all that, or are they just talking about, even though maybe it's been dry for 30 days and here's a 100-year storm, that's not nearly as bad as a big storm when it's been wet for 30 days. So,
John, did you have I know this is something we've talked about, in the last month or so. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, exactly. We've been talking about this. So I think there's two ways to look at it. One, when we talk about a 100-year storm, a storm is really kind of referring to a meteorological phenomenon, right? But it's really the outcome that we're looking at is what are the flows in the river or in an area that really is what we're trying to determine. So for instance, like this storm series that went through this past January, it didn't have as big of an effect in terms of the hydraulic runoff because there were storage in reservoirs to capture some of that downstream. So the unregulated flow, while it was still great, wasn't as much as if, for instance, all the reservoirs were full. So going back to kind of the 100-year storm, I think we have to look at that as the 100-year storm is in terms of hydrology. If we look at it from that way, then that's kind of the starting point of understanding what we mean by saying 100-year storm. So focusing on the hydrology itself, but happy to have others on.
Oh, that's exactly the conversation we were having as all this was unfolding. What does this mean? And especially too, I mean, as I mentioned, our team's trying to develop another way to, explain this 100-year, 200-year event. And so that's also when it's come up of like, what is this truly? And it's the big picture. If there's a lot of variables that go into it, that's what makes it incredibly difficult to pin down. One of the things we talked about is maybe, hurricanes have, category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is there a way to do that? Well, it's hard to do that because you have to take in the whole picture. What's the entire, what's the outlay look like from a hydrological perspective? It's difficult, but it's incredibly confusing when you try to explain to somebody what 100 or 200-year level protection is. It's nearly misleading.
Yeah.
Additional questions or comments from the board? Any public comment on this item? Okay, Willie, anything else from you on this item?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated. Okay, next we're going to move on to item 7. I think this might be you too, Ryan. Which is consider approving the general manager's emergency contract actions to repair the South Canal crossing at Weir 2.
Yeah, good morning again. Ryan McNally, Director of Water Resources and Flood Risk Reduction. We're going to shift gears to water resources now. So what staff is asking for is the board to consider authorizing the general manager to invoke the emergency purchasing procedures for repair out on, we call it Weir 2. It's out on the South Canal. And this originally was a part of a project that we identified as kind of our normal capital improvements. But when our engineering team was out there, we noticed that there was some damage incurred during the January high rain events. And so because it's occurring on the South Canal, there's a very small window of work or an opportunity for work before irrigation deliveries start later this spring. So if we were to go to the standard bid process, it could potentially take us up to a couple months to get through that. So that's why we're asking the board to consider this emergency authorization. Now, just to be clear, this is not proclaiming a county emergency. It's not, it's not on that side of the house where there's going to be FEMA or anything like that. This is just acknowledging a local situation where we need to consider circumventing the standard purchasing procedures.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board? Any public comment on this item? Okay, entertain a motion.
Moved. No, second it.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Director Bishop, Director Matthews,
Yes.
Director Vasquez,
Me? Yes. It said yes twice.
Oh, Director Matthews, did you confirm? Yes.
Can't hear you.
You give it a thumbs up, Director Matthews?
Oh.
Okay, great.
Director Bradford,
Yes.
Director Fuhr,
Yes.
Director Blazier,
Yes.
Director Missick.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Next up is
Thank you.
Manager's report.
Okay, I'll try and whip through this. So first off, reservoir conditions, get there. New Bullard's Bar is at about 800,000 acre feet of storage. That's 130% of normal year to date. And we've had about 445,000 acre feet of inflow since October 1st. That's 135% of average. Generally, we're doing really well. I attended the NACWA Dry Year Task Force meeting this morning, and all the watersheds report out on their conditions. And we heard that Shasta's doing much better, but still not in the greatest of shape. We are in good shape. We're kind of in between. We're definitely not in water conservation mode and minimum flows on the lower Yuba River or above minimum flows, and we're about to, depending on the storm situation, touch the flood reservation. We thought we'd hit the flood reservation over the weekend, but that storm was lighter than we forecast, and so we didn't. So we're in great shape. Our snowpack is 150% of average year to date, and that's equivalent of 100% of the April 1st average to date. So we're in great shape both in our actual captured storage and in our snowpack. As far as generation goes, December was a great month, but it wasn't because we hit our targeted production, it's because the market was really good. Our estimated production was 35,000 megawatt hours, and we actually, 50,000 megawatt hours, and we actually generated 35,000 megawatt hours. But our forecasted revenue is only 4.6 million, but we got 10.6 million in revenue. So significantly more revenue with less megawatts. Obviously, the market was different than we thought, and that was due to high natural gas prices. So we're still trying to get to the bottom of what actually caused the high natural gas prices, but we're not the only ones searching for answers. I saw in KCRA 3 last night that there was a whole segment on our California energy bills and the cost of natural gas in California versus the rest of the country. So something's going on with conveyance, getting natural gas from, let's say, Texas or Canada to California, and weather phenomenon and storm phenomenons and that. But the bottom line is the energy market was really good in December, and we did well. I reported early on, or both January's first board meeting and the second board meeting, that the Narrows 1 generator was out of service because of basically the cables that connect it to the grid. We've since replaced those cables. We procured a little different type of a cable system, but we got those installed and tested and back up and running. So Narrows 1 is available. That was great news. And I want to thank the crew for actually doing that in-house. That's not a normal kind of maintenance practice. It was actually a repair that we don't have a lot of experience in, and we don't get to do routinely. And they did a great job both finding a replacement cable and getting it installed and tested in a timely manner. On February 1st, we had the Department of Safety, or the Division of Safety of Dams, part of the Department of Water Resources. So the state arm that kind of regulates the safety of our dams as opposed to the FERC. We had them out at Lake Francis, and we cycled the low-level outlet for them to show them that it worked. That's a operation that we do annually, but we do in front of DSOD every 3 years. Okay, now the more administrative stuff. On January 24th, Ryan McNally met with Department of Water Resources Deputy Director Paul Goslin and NACWA to discuss the groundwater sustainability planning process and DWR's challenges with developing acceptance criteria of plans being submitted by groundwater sustainability agencies. DWR recognizes Yuba Water as a leader in groundwater management and has asked for our participation in developing the technical review process for groundwater sustainability plans. I'll just remind you that we do have an approved groundwater sustainability plan. We submitted ours 2 years early. We received approval 2 years early, and there have been some comments, and we do have some work to do over the next 5 years on making revisions to our plan. But we're seen as a leader because we have been managing groundwater sustainably since in the North Basin, a long time, but in the South Basin since the early 1980s when we started delivering surface water to the south part of the county. So Ryan and team will be working with DWR to help them with the overall analysis of other basins plans. So excellent job, Ryan. So as you're aware, the state redistricted all state legislative districts last year, and in Yuba County, Senator Nielsen's retirement and the move of Yuba County into the new 1st Senate district resulted in a 2-year gap between the new lines taking effect, which they already have, and an election taking place in Yuba County with the new district lines in place, which will take place in 2024. And due to similar situations across the state Senate has assigned senators to represent these deferred areas for the next 2 years. And Senator Roger Nilo from the Sacramento metropolitan area has been assigned to Yuba County. His staff has already reached out, to us, and we'll meet with him and work with him in the future. Excuse me. On the HR update, we're pleased to welcome Kimberly Knight as our newest administrative assistant. Kim is a resident of Yuba County. She began her employment with the agency in early January and is stationed at the front desk at F Street. So you'll probably see her when you go in and out of the F Street office. Kim has a bachelor's in business administration from Walden University and a master's in human resource management from National University. Kim also has a real estate license and has worked in the real estate industry for the past 6 years. And prior to that, Kim served in positions that included solar permit and energy coordinator, legal secretary and assistant, and an HR coordinator. And she's a welcomed addition to the agency. And I need to apologize for Kim because one, I had an all staff meeting a few weeks ago and I introduced one of the new employees that just started a couple weeks prior, and Kim was sitting right across from me at the table. I said, who else started recently? Literally, I think they thought I was joking, but I just totally forgot that Kim started. And I see her every day, walk by her every day. So Kim, if you're on, I apologize for that. And I apologize for this update being a couple weeks late as well, but we're happy to have you. Also, HR is working to update and finalize many of the agency's job descriptions, and we intend to bring those to the board for approval at a meeting in the next month or two. And once approved, those job descriptions will be added to the agency website. In addition, the agency continues to expand staffing in many of our departments to account for transferring significant portions of our work currently being done by consultants. The board can expect an item on the March agenda requesting additional staffing resources. And the HR department continues to implement its HRIS through NeoGov. This is our Human Resource Information Systems process. And they're spending about 5 to 10 hours per week on training in the system, and will begin building out a customized system by early March. And we expect to have a recruitment and onboarding piece of this system completed by April. In the communications realm, DWR released an article about the value of implementing forecast-informed reservoir operations and talked specifically about our collaboration with them on FIRO. The territorial dispatch covered our first meeting and the New Year's leadership and board members. And Dee was on 93Q last week promoting the tricky Yuba and just general agency updates. And Jackie's been working hard as well. In the weeks ahead, we're sponsoring the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, the Chamber Gala, and of course, the Botkai Weekend. And we're planning to march in the Botkai Parade. And if you'd like to join us, just let Dee Dee know. We also have the opportunity to participate in a crisis response training exercise. I want you to know that when you read this paragraph, if you read this paragraph in my report, this paragraph describes a training exercise and is not a real life incident. But we did a training exercise on the 25th, and we hired a firm, social simulator, to test how we would respond to a multifaceted and multi-jurisdictional crisis, and had participants join from Yuba County, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and local school districts, and of course, agency staff, to see how well we all work with and here's the scenario. And it was all of them are realistic, but all of them combined were crazy. Cyber attack, physical attack, uncontrolled release of water from New Blowers Bar, and a resulting levee failure with disastrous flooding in Marysville. Remember, this is an exercise. This is what we practiced. The bottom line is this is how I kind of close that meeting. Our communications team does a wonderful job communicating all the great things the agency does. But one of the most important things we need to plan for is the crisis. And it's very likely some type of flood event, but it could be a wildfire, it could be some other type of disaster like we explained here. Dee Dee did a great job setting up the scenario and getting the right staff members just on the scenario setup side, and getting the right people at the training to actually go through a functional training. Like, we actually had a mock press release type of conference where we all stood up, us and the county folks stood up and did like a mock. Hey, the reporters are asking you questions, reporters are drilling you. And we have these folks that are trained to do this, like drilling us and asking us questions on why we operated this way and what's going to happen next and how are we going to evacuate the people. And it was stressful. I mean, it was a real life scenario. Bottom line is that's what we need to plan for and be prepared for. And I just want to thank Dee Dee and her team and all the folks that worked on that. That's an important aspect of the benefits this agency provides. So with all that, our next board meeting is February 21st. Lastly, at the end of this week, I've been asked to speak at the Association of California Loggers annual meeting in Anderson on Thursday morning. So I'm hoping maybe we recruit some timber operators to go work on Joanna's programs up in the hills. So I'm going to speak at that. And then later Thursday and on Friday, I'll be at the California Foundation for the Economy and Environment conference in Sonoma. And this is their energy conference. So I'll be talking about upcoming developments in California's energy market and conditions. With that, sorry, I tried to go short, but there was lots to talk about. Thank you.
Any questions from the board on manager's report?
Two quick questions. When we talk about average year to date, so if it's from last year, I understood, but if it's average, is it 5-year average, 10-year average? What is our span?
Man, it all depends on the what we're talking about, but it's at least 20 years plus. And sometimes it's water supply, sometimes it's snowpack, but it's several years. It's more than 5, and it's likely more than 20.
Cool. And then the second question was, when we went from 50,000 to 35,000 megawatts produced, was that on the basis of we discharged less water? Was it because the Narrows 2 was down? What was the cause of that?
Yeah, it wasn't because of an outage with the generator, even though Narrows 1 did go out in early January. This was because we were in conservation mode, and when we developed those forecasts, we developed them in June for the next year. So we just assume it's going to be like a 50% probability year, and it was less than that. Right, it was pretty dry in early December, so we were in what we call conservation mode. And in the beginning of my manager's report, I talked about we're not there anymore. We're not in conservation mode today, but we're also not like getting out of the flood pool either. We're kind of in that in-between area. We're in an area where we have a lot of discretion on how much water we discharge. That's not where we were in December. We were in full conservation mode. So that's the the significant reduction.
Great. Thank you, Willie. We're going to move on to board member reports. Director Matthews, I'm not sure if we can hear you, but I wanted to give you an opportunity if you have anything to report. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to Director Vasquez.
Former Yuba County Sheriff Gary Tindall passed away February 2nd. I'd like to adjourn in memory of Sheriff Tindall and get it signed by the full board. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
Just want to thank Ryan again for the flood risk reduction presentation. It's just overwhelming. Thanks.
Director Fuhr.
They have a meeting for the Orville Dam Advisory coming up. So if someone would like to go, Wayne, if you'd like to attend that, if anyone would like to, let me know. It's, I believe, on the 24th up in Orville. And it's a great way to understand what's going on with the dam and the changes and modifications and improvements they've made. Secondly, I was just so inspired by Fletcher fleecing us for the money for Buckeye that I went ahead and sponsored Say Love for February. And so we're going to be doing our Say Love event the same Saturday as Buckeye, and we'll be doing our feed down at the Buckeye Parade for those participants. So if the water agency would like to barbecue or do something there for the Say Love Buckeye event, let me know.
Director Messick.
Shouldn't you be having Chinese food?
If someone knows how to cook it, I'll serve it.
I only had a comment on your presentation, Ryan. It's very good. And somebody asked if there's a difference scenario, if you know, maybe it was Wayne that asked if it's already saturated and everything else. It seems to me, growing up here on the Yuba River my entire life, time we have these really huge events, it doesn't matter how much it rains, it matters how much snow melts at the same time. So I think that's probably their biggest threat of a 97, 86, 64. Nobody ever talks about that one. Is a huge snowpack and then a week of warm rain on top of the snow. Smelling comment.
Okay, Director Bishop. Okay, my comment, you should, I think in your email, you should have seen something from NACWA, their annual meetings coming up on March 3rd at Sierra Nevada Brewery. So there's information in there on how to RSVP for anyone who's interested in going. I've attended that in the past, back before COVID, when they had it in person, and it was always a great event, really focused on Northern California and the Sacramento Valley and the water issues that we deal with. And so definitely would encourage you to attend if you're available. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.